Amara's studio smelled of turpentine and old varnish as she worked on the painting. The client had mentioned it was an heirloom from their family in Ravencroft, but it didn't look like anything cherished. The dark, somber tones of the painting were unsettling, almost absorbing the light from the room. She pushed her chair back, rubbing her temples. Hours of delicate restoration had uncovered strange patterns beneath the original paint, swirls and etchings that seemed more intentional than accidental. As she turned the canvas to examine the edges, she noticed a loose panel on the back. Curious, she grabbed her small toolkit and carefully pried it open. A thin, leather-bound book slid out, its surface cracked with age. The initials EM were pressed into the cover, almost unreadable under the layers of dust. Amara's fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, neat handwriting filled the pages, each line detailing an event: a fire, a theft, a disappearance. They all seemed random until she noticed something chilling. A recent entry described a robbery in a nearby city. She remembered reading about it in the news just days ago. Her heart raced. The diary seemed to know what would happen before it occurred. Flipping through the pages, she found references to Ravencroft and a cryptic mention of a Tower of Silence. Something about it tugged at her curiosity. Was this diary a strange coincidence, or was there more to the story of this eerie painting? The drive to Ravencroft was uneventful, but the town itself was far from ordinary. Narrow cobblestone streets twisted through tightly packed buildings, their rooftops sagging under the weight of years. Amara parked near the town square, where a weathered fountain stood in disrepair, its water trickling faintly. She began her investigation by speaking to the locals, asking about the painting and the diary. Most people were polite but evasive, their eyes darting away whenever she mentioned the Tower of Silence. At a cafe, she overheard a hushed conversation between two elderly women seated nearby. "It's the echoes again," one muttered. "They never truly leave." Amara leaned in. "Excuse me," she said. "What do you mean by echoes?" The women froze, exchanging uneasy glances. "Best not to meddle, miss," one said, quickly gathering her things and leaving. Undeterred, Amara visited the town archives. There, dusty shelves held records dating back centuries. She uncovered references to the Tower of Silence, described as an abandoned structure on the town's outskirts. It was once used as a sanctuary, but a tragic event had left it shrouded in mystery. As she left the archives clutching her notes, the diary seemed to hum with energy in her bag. She couldn't shake the feeling that the tower was calling to her. Then she saw it. A new entry had appeared in the diary. It read, "The next echo will ring at midnight." Midnight arrived with an unsettling calm. Amara stood by the window of her inn, staring at the quiet town square. Then came the sound, a loud crash, followed by shouting. She grabbed her coat and rushed outside. A small crowd had gathered near the bakery, which was engulfed in flames. The fire spread rapidly despite the efforts of the townsfolk to douse it with buckets of water. Amara's stomach twisted as she remembered the diary's prediction. It was happening exactly as written. The next morning, Amara sifted through the diary again. Every entry described tragedies, fires, accidents, disappearances, and they all seemed linked to the tower. She knew she couldn't ignore the connection any longer. The diary's warnings weren't coincidences. With growing determination, she decided to visit the Tower of Silence. Whatever secrets it held, she needed to uncover them before another echo rang out. The Tower of Silence stood like a forgotten sentinel at the edge of the forest, its stone walls weathered and cracked. Vines snaked up its sides, and the air around it felt heavier, as if the structure itself repelled intruders. Amara hesitated before stepping inside. The interior was dark, her flashlight barely piercing the gloom. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, their patterns reminiscent of the swirls she'd uncovered in the painting. A faint whisper seemed to emanate from the stones themselves. The echoes remember. The voices murmured. Amara followed the whispers to a central chamber where a broken mirror rested on a pedestal. The glass shimmered faintly despite the lack of light, reflecting distorted images of the room. As she reached out to touch it, a shadow moved at the edge of her vision. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice echoing. A hooded figure stepped forward, their face obscured. Before she could react, they turned and vanished into the shadows. Heart pounding, Amara knew she had to decipher the symbols she had seen. They held the key to understanding the diary and the tower's dark influence. Back in Ravencroft, Amara visited Elias, a reclusive historian known for his knowledge of local lore. His cluttered home was filled with books, maps, and faded artifacts. When she showed him the diary and described the symbols from the tower, his face darkened. "This is no ordinary artifact," Elias said, running his fingers over the diary's cover. "It's a chronicle of fate." The writer, whoever they were, was cursed to record tragedies, events that were destined to happen. They couldn't interfere without consequences. Amara frowned. "But the diary doesn't just record events. It's predicting them. And new entries are appearing as I read it." Elias hesitated. "That means the curse isn't dormant. It's alive and it's attached to you now." The weight of his words sank in. Amara's connection to the diary meant she was now part of its dark cycle. Elias warned her that meddling with fate could have dire repercussions, but Amara couldn't ignore the entries. The latest prediction described the upcoming town festival, hinting at a catastrophic collapse. She couldn't stand by and do nothing. As she left Elias's house, her resolve solidified. If the diary truly tied her to the echoes, she would use that connection to stop the tragedies, no matter the cost. The town square buzzed with activity as workers prepared for the festival. Bright banners fluttered in the wind, and children laughed as they helped arrange decorations. Amara's chest tightened as she read the diary again. The entry described a stage collapsing during the festival, injuring many. She had less than a day to prevent it. Determined, she inspected the construction area, looking for anything that might cause a collapse. The stage's wooden beams seemed sturdy, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Her thoughts were interrupted by a low, gravelly voice behind her. "You shouldn't be here," it warned. Amara spun around to see the hooded figure from the tower. Their presence was imposing, and their voice carried an unnatural weight. "The echoes must happen," they said. "You cannot change them." "Watch me," Amara retorted, backing away slowly. The figure lunged, trying to grab the diary from her hands. She dodged, clutching it tightly as they chased her through the festival grounds. The chase ended when Amara tripped over a loose beam, the diary tumbling to the ground. As she scrambled to retrieve it, she noticed the ink on the page shifting. The words describing the stage collapse morphed, now reflecting her actions. Amara's heart raced. The diary wasn't just predicting events, it was reacting to her interference. Back at the inn, Amara locked the door and sat with the diary on her lap. The final entry made her blood run cold. It described her own death. The words were clear. "At the tower, the echoes take their final toll. The rider must fall to end the cycle." A knock on the door startled her. It was the hooded figure, but this time they didn't seem hostile. Their voice was calm as they spoke. "You don't understand what you're tampering with. The diary isn't just a record, it's a balance. If you destroy it, you risk unraveling everything tied to it." Amara listened, torn between fear and determination. If the diary continued to exist, countless tragedies would keep unfolding. But if she destroyed it, she had no idea what the consequences would be. The figure handed her a single page torn from the diary. It was blank, save for one sentence. "The echoes demand sacrifice." Amara knew what she had to do. She couldn't let the echoes continue, even if it meant paying the price herself. Amara returned to the Tower of Silence under the cover of night. The air felt heavier than before, as if the tower itself anticipated her arrival. She climbed to the central chamber, where the broken mirror still rested on its pedestal. The hooded figure followed her, their steps echoing ominously. "Are you sure about this?" they asked. "Once you destroy it, there's no going back." Amara nodded. "If the echoes stop, it's worth it." She placed the diary on the pedestal and raised a heavy stone. Her hands shook as she brought it down, shattering the diary into fragments. A blinding light filled the chamber, and the whispers of the echoes turned into a deafening roar before fading into silence. When the light receded, the figure was gone, and the tower felt empty. Amara staggered outside, the air fresh and still. For the first time in days, Ravencroft seemed at peace. Back at her studio, Amara found a new painting on her easel. It depicted the Tower of Silence, its broken mirror intact, with an unmarked diary resting on the pedestal. She realized the cycle might not be completely broken. The echoes had been silenced, but for how long?